Hey everyone, time for another retrospective. Now let's take a look at what I consider to be the true peak creation of behavior, the Cursed Legacy chapter. Cursed Legacy is probably the best original chapter that Behavior have produced, and that's saying something, seeing as we have 14 original chapters or paragraphs in the game. Cursed Legacy came at a time where things were pretty great, and the game felt like it was truly thriving. Chapter 13 was the Stranger Things chapter, probably the biggest chapter the game has ever had, in terms of the popularity of the license, but also in the amount of attention it drew to the game. So chapter 14 really needed to be something special, being original and following Stranger Things. This chapter had to retain all those new people. It's November 13th, 2019, and the chapter 14 teaser trailer drops. Oddly, it features the family residence in the Yamaoka estate realm, a map already in the game. We enter inside, and we focus on the shrine that has been present on the map for over a year. The shrine is surrounded by blood, which it is slowly absorbing up, all of it into the mask mounted on the wall, a katana resting above. Soon it is clear that it's not actually absorbing the blood, but the footage is playing in reverse. This quickly led many to speculate that for this chapter we would be going far into the past, more specifically the past of the Yamaoka estate and the Yamaoka bloodline. 6 days later, on November 19th, 2019, the official trailer drops. In terms of the killer, everyone has that pretty much figured out already. Some people even guessing the killer's name, the Oni. This was done just by looking at the mask in the teaser trailer. The true surprise of this trailer was not the killer, but the survivor, Yui Kimura. Speeding on a dark road, head down in focus, Yui rides a bright pink neon bike. The trailer ends with her standing tall, facing down the Oni, as his eyes glow fiery and red. The same day, the PTB was released, allowing PC players to view the content in store for chapter 14. So, PTB gets loaded up. Let's talk about the lore. The lore was pretty amazing, and possibly the best original lore we've had in the game. The Oni, or Kazan Yamaoka, was established as a new member or old member of the Yamaoka family. It was pretty cool at the time that he was related to another killer, the Spirit, being her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. For two killers to be related like this was a big deal, especially back then when we hadn't received the twins or the close connection of Yunjin and Ji-woon in All Kill yet. I think this was one of those big moments where the characters in the realm were fleshed out and felt more like real people with histories. For the Spirit, it also added a lot more depth to her lore. Seeing and hearing the terrible deeds of Kazan made you understand where Rin's father had gotten his anger, and the Yamaokas their reputation. Kazan's story is one of rage and relentlessness. His lore is set at the end of the Edo period, a time in Japan where the samurai were coming to an end. This is where Kazan stepped in, a true samurai in his eyes, who sought to rid the land of imposters, taking up the samurai name. Through his lore, he cuts through hundreds, killing anyone who gets in the way of him and his mission. He would claim trophies and humiliate those he defeated, tearing off their armor and sculpting the top knots from their heads. He eventually earns the name Oni Yamaoka from a lord, an insult which only makes him angrier. There is a turning point in the story where he is faced by another true samurai. He fights the samurai and kills him, only to discover it is his father. In his dying moments, he looks at Kazan in shame. Kazan feels shameful. He feels like an imposter himself. Enraged, he seeks out the lord who desecrated his name, tearing his tongue from his mouth and massacring his people. With his goal complete, he steps out of the lord's villa to find himself surrounded. Fighting through waves of people, he eventually falls, bleeding to death in a stone mill. The story of Oni is a brutal and sad one, revealing humanity in an otherwise monstrous character. Oni is driven by certain ideas that his father had instilled in him, being a great samurai himself, only to ask Kazan to pursue something he deemed more noble. Kazan is lost and misled, and by the time he figures that out, he's a bit too deep to turn around, and so commits to his original pursuit, ending in his own death and the cursing of his bloodline. Yui's lore was equally amazing. Yui was introduced as a street racer and skilled mechanic who had grown up on and around motorbikes. There was something very refreshing about Yui's character. She had a strong presence without really doing much, and that was largely to do with her design, which we'll discuss in a bit. Yui's story starts off with her just kind of really loving motorbikes and tinkering tinkering with mechanical things. Her father hates it, but her grandmother encourages it, giving her a good luck hachimaki, which she wears into her adulthood. Yui leaves home as her father tells her she is not welcome. She then buys a racing bike and enters into illegal street races, winning more money than she could have ever dreamt of. She becomes so popular that other women motorcyclists begin to wear Yui's signature pink, forming into a gang. This newfound attention brings Yui unwanted attention also, as she notices someone who has been stalking her. When she returns home one day, she finds her lucky hachimaki is gone. The police laugh and refuse to help her. Later she comes home to find the stalker in her apartment. The stalker pulls a knife on her, but she fights him off, receiving many injuries in the process. Her gang helped her to pay off her medical bills. She went through rehabilitation so she could race again, helped by her gang, who also provide her with a new pink hachimaki. The gang became known as the Sakura 7, a gang that wore pink hachimakis as a symbol of unity and support for women needing help from stalkers and abusers. The gang grew into something big, the pink becoming synonymous with women's empowerment. With her winnings, Yui supported the Sakura 7. Yui wins prestigious races such as the All Japan Moto Championship, being the youngest woman to do so. One day in the illegal TK3 street race, she enters an unnatural fog, never to be seen again. Yui's story is one of the more powerful ones out of the Survivor roster, and she honestly feels like a properly fleshed out character, with strengths, flaws, and goals, which can often feel rare for Dead by Daylight. Yui to me is still the best written Survivor character in the game, and one which was crafted with a lot of care. The character design was one of the best parts of this chapter, with both the Oni and Yui Kimura receiving highly detailed character models. The Oni was based off of Onis from Japanese folklore, but with a few adjustments here and there. Due to the way Kazan died and the entity taking him in this moment, it's pretty likely that he's not actually an Oni in the Japanese folklore sense, but instead one in the entity's image. He featured basically all the key points you would typically see on an Oni though, such as the third eye, the blue tinted skin, the horns, and the kanabo. This was mixed with his ceremonial samurai armor, and the signature katana or Yamaoka blade. His third eye and horns also weren't quite inbuilt into Kazan, but instead fixed onto a mask, so there was kind of a mix of both taking from established folklore and then the devs adding their own flair to it. One of the coolest looking parts of the Oni is his blood fury, where he bursts into flames with a scream, his body and armor seeping with this red fiery substance. This mix of inspiration and originality seems to be where the devs really shine when it comes to character creation. When they have a solid basis but a passion to still create something original, they do their best work in my opinion. Yui was kitted out in her biker gear in her base outfit, with her key color being pink. She had goggles, tough durable boots, and her Sakura 7 hachimaki wrapped around her wrist. Over her outfit she had this nice golden colored writing and her Sakura 7 logo. She stood out as one of the more fearless looking survivors, shown in the trailer to stand up to the Oni. Her facial expression is stern, but calm. Design wise they showed she was a leader and someone to be respected, someone who had overcome hardship and now when faced with more in the entity's realm was ready to take it on. Both of these designs work so well I think because you could basically tell what both characters were about by just looking at them. It didn't feel like it needed to be explained for you to understand who they were, and when it is, it only expands on them as characters and doesn't take away, which essentially means they were both well designed and well crafted characters. For this chapter there was a map too. The map was Sanctum of Wrath, the second entry into the Yamaoka estate realm. The map wasn't too well received, having many of the problems that the family residence map had. It was too large, had too much cover or places to hide, and it had kind of a weird and awkward layout. The upside to it was that visually it did look great. Much like the family residence, the map had similar key features such as the arches and arbors, and kept very in line with its aesthetic. It also had cool little secrets like the statues surrounding the base of the sanctum turning to face you when you looked away. So despite this being not the best gameplay wise, as always it was well received on the visual side. So the PTB rolls around. How did it go gameplay wise? Well, the main focus was on the Oni and his power, Blood Fury. Blood Fury is a power that requires you to hit survivors, absorb the blood orbs they dropped from being injured to empower yourself, and then go crazy with a kanabo that can insta-down. Blood Fury's introduction was a lot like Hillbilly's chainsaw and Maya's scaling power coming together as one. The Oni had a slow start but a truly character-fitting late game where you could be unrelenting as you constantly entered your power. It also had additional benefits over characters like Hillbilly, as when you used one of the power's abilities, Demon Dash, where you could sprint really quickly, you could collide with walls without being broken out of your power. This wasn't really a problem though. The problem instead lied coincide with how effective this power was on loops. When you activated Demon Dash and then the insta-down attack, Demon Strike, you could flick to the side extremely quickly. It was soon discovered that the increased speed of Demon Dash, paired with the fact that there was no cap to your turning rate when doing a Demon Strike, could allow players to flick their Kanabo round loops at 180-degree angles, catching survivors out easily and making many loops completely useless. There was some skill required to do this, of course, but it still meant that most loops were almost completely redundant, as if Oni had his power, which he basically always did, it was very unlikely you could escape both his speed and his insta-down. Think of this Oni state almost like Blight's current one, and his ability to have different text that allows sharp flicks around loops and corners. It was amplified on Oni too because of the fact that he could insta-down. It was also very powerful because when downing a survivor, it didn't affect the duration of Blood Fury. Now, if you down someone, it takes a chunk off of the duration. Back then, it didn't even do that, giving you even more time to use it. So yeah, that was really the main focus and controversy of the PTB and Oni's initial state, was his ability to basically 180 flick around loops and shut them down incredibly easily. For survivors, there was the Yui perk Any Means Necessary, a perk that lets survivors pick up dropped pallets, which was met with shock and awe by the community, as half of the player base said, finally we can pick up pallets, and the other half said, that's so OP. Any Means was a little more powerful in the PTB in all fairness, having a 3-second interaction time, later to be changed to 4. It didn't really have too much of an impact though, and simply led to killers making sure they broke pallets when they were dropped. I would argue despite this perk seeming like it was going to make some real waves, it never really did have that big of an effect on gameplay. Her other two perks, Lucky Break and Breakout, were both interesting and filled niche roles of their own. Lucky Break allowing you to mask your trails of blood when injured, and Breakout to speed up the wiggle rate of your teammates being carried when you were in proximity. Lucky Break was a bit better, with a 180-second timer over its current 60-second one. However, back then it also didn't mask scratch marks, only blood. Breakout, to the best of my knowledge, has not received a single change since this PTB and its initial version. The Oni's perks were pretty standard, and didn't offer too much in the way of being meta-defining or shifting. Zanshin Tactics was windows of opportunity for killers, and a decent pairing with Oni's ability to flick around corners and close down loops. Blood Echo, a perk that made survivors exhausted when they were injured and a teammate was hooked, was pretty okay. This also paired nicely with Oni's power, that aimed to keep people injured for as long as possible. Finally, Nemesis, a perk that would make a survivor oblivious, and the obsession whenever you were struck by a pallet or stunned by a head-on locker play, was also okay. That was essentially the PTB. Mostly there was focus on the Oni's strong power, but in general everything was well received. On the 3rd of December 2019, the Cursed Legacy chapter was released to live servers. For Oni, they nerfed a decent amount. The biggest nerf was to his flicks and Demon Dash. They nerfed the ability to flick as hard, as in 180-degree hard, but it was still relatively easy to catch people out on loops, but notably the ability had been stunted with a slower movement speed and hard cap, which it was deserving of. There was also some good quality of life changes, like receiving blood orbs and pulling someone out of a locker or hooking them. An additional half second was added onto his after dash cooldown also. Generally though, the slightly nerfed Oni was still received pretty well, and everyone was overall quite satisfied with the adjustments. During this time there was some other interesting changes happening, such as the new rank reset only putting you back by 1 color rank, updates to status effects and the way they displayed on the HUD, and balanced landing losing its anti-stagger effect when exhausted. It all seemed to be going fine, but soon after the release of Chapter 14, controversy arose as the Oni was majorly nerfed just a week after launch, and after the initial nerf to his turning rate, making the turning arc even more restricted to the point where his power was greatly stunted. Many players became angry as they believed the devs had waited for them to buy the DLC to then nerf the Oni. It wasn't even that big of a deal because he was too good, and even after the nerf, he was still decent. However, this did lead to a bit of an uproar, and eventually the changes were basically reverted back and have largely stayed the same to this day. Oni is probably the closest thing I've had to a consistent main when I play killer. I tend to jump between characters a lot, but when I play Oni, I know I can have fun basically always. To me, he is incredibly well designed and offers enjoyable game progression and fun interaction with survivors. I like playing him, and I also like facing him. I personally love scaling killers that start out quite weak and build their powers up. Oni is somewhat of a perfected version of Myers, where where with Myers you get to use your power quite a bit less. With Oni you get it almost always as long as you keep survivors injured. You can chain your blood furies together and it's pretty satisfying. Oni also doesn't have those same issues that high mobility killers like Hillbilly have. On indoor maps Oni can still work, which feels good. He can play well on basically any map and can adapt pretty easily to almost every tile, which I think makes chases for both sides a whole lot more fun. Yui is equally a factor for this chapter's success, and if it hadn't been for the Oni also having an amazing design, she could have easily stolen the show, which is impressive for a survivor character. She was well written, compelling, and refreshing. So, did this chapter live up to and continue the hype that Stranger Things brought? Yes, I think it did. Let me know what you thought too, down below. Thanks, and goodbye.